Well, it's a sin. To who? It's a sin. To who? To everyone. That's kind of how sins work. See, but that's not true. Sin is subjective. It says so in Romans 14:14. In it, Paul says, I'm convinced, being fully persuaded by the Lord Jesus, that nothing is unclean in itself. But if someone regards something as unclean, then for that person, it is unclean. So I say again, for who? Because it depends on the person.
This is what happens when you intentionally read a verse out of context. You can make it mean anything you want it to mean. Now, if we actually look at Romans chapter 14 in its entirety, you would see that Paul was talking about eating food that is clean, but you think it's unclean. This is about the concept of sinning against God in one's own heart. In Romans chapter 14, Paul was making the point that although he knew all food was clean, if one were to eat food thinking that it was a sin, but did so anyway, then it is a sin. Not because what you're eating is actually dirty, but because of the reason that you're eating it, which would be to rebel against God's law. This is about your relationship with God and how that dictates whether or not your behavior is sinful. Now, does this change the fact that the law of God is objective? No. The law set forth by God about greed, murder, homosexuality, envy, obedience, and so on all still apply. Sin is objective no matter what. The point that Paul was making in Romans chapter 14 is that a person can sin if they're being willingly rebellious towards God, even if they're not breaking one of God's commandments. If you believe it to be sinful, whether it truly is or not, and you do so anyway, you're showing God that you're willing to rebel against Him. Let's use an example. Imagine that two brothers are playing, and one lies to the other and says, Dad said he does not want you going into the yard. To which the other brother replies, I don't care what Dad says. Now, even though the father never actually said that, one brother has shown that he is willing to disobey his father. Does that make sense? Whether you violate a real rule or not, it's your attitude towards God and His authority that constitutes whether your behavior is sinful or not. Now, that doesn't mean that sin is subjective, and I'll tell you why. The moment you decide to rebel, you have already broken the first commandment. You shall not have any other gods before me. Choosing whatever you're choosing to do instead of being obedient to God means that you have chosen an idol over your Creator. And since we've established that rebelling against God is about your attitude, which can all be tied back to the objective first commandment, it makes it impossible for sin to be subjective, as was suggested by our friend in the beginning of the video. As always, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. Please like, subscribe, share the video, and hit that join button if you're interested in supporting the channel further. It really would help a lot. Be safe, good, and blessed, and remember that tomorrow is not promised to anyone. Have a good one, guys.